Hi, everybody. Just before we start, I just want to have a reminder to please turn off your phones and put away any laptops if you have them out. And the panel is going to be Q&A style, so when we're done reading the questions I have set out, we'll take some questions from the audience if there's any time left. And I'm just going to introduce everybody briefly. So next to me is Kyle Barkhouse. He's a commercial marketing associate at CertaPro Painters. Next to him, there's Peter Luke, who is the sales manager at Pearson Canada. We have Ashley McDonald. She's the director of sales at MBS Radio. And John Allen, he's the owner of Gryphon Bird Control. So we're going to start with question 1, and it's to please briefly describe the organization you work for and your position.
So as you mentioned, I work with CertaPro Painters. We do residential, commercial painting for interiors, exteriors, you name it. And the fun part is there's really nobody in the world around that I don't get to talk to, because whether you think you need it or not, we service those people, and I get a lot of fun from that.
I work with Pearson Education. Pearson is a learning company. We call ourselves a learning company now. We used to be a publisher. I work in the higher ed division, so I'm sure all of you use some of our products in your courses. I'm a sales manager with the company. I have reps in Ottawa, Montreal, and then 4 of them down here in Atlantic, Canada.
I work for MBS Radio, that's Maritime Broadcast Systems. We have 24 radio stations across the Maritimes, and in Halifax we have 89.9 The Wave and FX 101.9 The Country Station. I am the director of sales, and I have a team of about 40 sales reps and sales managers across the Maritimes who effectively sell air to advertisers. We sell radio advertising to all kinds of local, medium, small businesses and national organizations as well.
My name is John Allen. I'm the owner-operator of Gryphon Bird Control. I do nuisance bird control around industrial areas, scaring away gulls, crows, pigeons, that sort of thing. You often hear about that type of business at airports. I have done a little bit of activity around an airport, but mostly around industrial areas.
What do you like about your work? What do you dislike about it? And what do you find the most challenging?
Favorite part is, like I said, I get to talk to everybody. My title is basically a glorified way of saying I'm paid to go make friends with people. Karen, I know, has taught me, so she knows very well. That's my favorite thing to do in the day. There's honestly nothing I dislike about it. I wake up in the morning, find out who I'm going to talk to, stop by, and get to do that. So I've landed kind of a sweet gig for what I want to do. And sorry, what was the last part of it?
What do you find the most challenging?
The most challenging is whenever you deal with corporate places, there's decision makers and there's what you'll learn to be called gatekeepers, office managers, admin assistants, and sometimes they don't want to put you through. Sometimes you have to find a way to sweet talk them to do that, and that can sometimes be the challenging part, is getting to talk to the right person and finding out if you're actually speaking to the decision maker or not. And once you get through that, the rest of it kind of just falls into place.
I really, about my job, I really enjoy the people I work with. I have 8 sales reps and then the people in my head office. And I particularly enjoy my customers as well. I call with my reps on campus. And, you know, I'll have a meeting with a physics professor, and then I'm meeting someone like Karen for, you know, I run into Karen twice a year or so, and we talk about their courses and their challenges, and so it's interesting that way. I really like the product that I sell, and the variety and the different things that we have that are kind of trying to enhance your learning experience. What I don't like is, what's a challenge for me is the value that we think that we can bring to your educational experience, and then we don't deal with the end user who are you so much as dealing with professors, so it's kind of a challenge in that regard, is trying to get our end customers to really see the value in what we do sell and produce.
I absolutely love the radio industry. It's super fun. I get to work with really kind of wacky people, radio announcers, anybody in the sales teams. They're a little bit outrageous as well. It's nonstop. In my role, I travel a lot, so I get to jump in a car at least once a week and drive anywhere, St. John, Miramichi, Cape Breton, Kentville, anywhere, you name it. I love having that freedom. I get to work with a lot of clients. I get to work with a ton of employees, and it's very rewarding. I report directly to the owner of the company. It's a locally owned business, and you have a lot of flexibility, so you don't have to go through the corporate red tape like many organizations. You get to just go direct to the top, ask for something, and you usually get to execute your idea relatively quickly. The most challenging part of the role, I would say, is recruiting. It's extremely difficult to find good talent, and it's extremely difficult to understand what the good talent is in the interviewing process. I wish there was an easier way to do that, and I would say for sure that's the most challenging in this industry.
I was fortunate enough that I was able to turn a hobby into a business. My hobby was falconry, so I got into falconry for the sport of it, for hunting with my birds, my hawks. So that's what I enjoyed about it, was being able to carry that hobby over into a business. On the business side of it, I guess what's not so great about it is the unpredictability of the contracts that you can get, that sometimes contracts can be canceled at any time, and being able to get new contracts is probably one of the biggest challenges, especially in the Atlantic provinces where money doesn't flow like in Alberta or BC or Ontario. It can be tough to get into a new industry to develop that relationship and take them on as a client. So that's what I find challenging from a small business standpoint.
How did you end up where you are today? So did you study marketing, or was this part of your career plan? What sort of education did you do?
Interesting story. When I actually first started university, I thought I was going to be a kinesiologist, and learned very quick that science wasn't my thing. So I actually got into running a student painting franchise. So I owned and operated that for 7 years. Then when I graduated from the mountain here, just almost 2 years ago now, a year ago, I started working for a HR technology company, selling to corporate businesses, small businesses, and getting to kind of have that feel for that. And then just recently started with CertaPro, so back to an industry I'm very familiar with. And then on top of that, dealing with the corporate world, which I've got very familiar with, and a little bit different than dealing with your residential. So big thing is definitely pay attention to Karen if she ever tells you big difference in B2B and B2C, because there's a huge difference in role. And as I said, I graduated here with a business admin degree and did my double major in management and marketing. And a little bit of everything kind of led me to where I am today, and my comfortability in speaking in front of people, because I know there's lots of presentations, and Karen, I think your class was one of two I took where every second day was a presentation. So that definitely takes a huge part into what I do.
It's kind of funny when Karen asked me if I wanted to sit in on this. I called her first and I said, I just want you to know kind of what you're getting, because I don't have a traditional kind of education background for to be a sales manager. So she said, "Oh, that's great, because we like diversity in the background." So I finished high school. I worked on a tugboat for a year. I didn't want to go to university. I had no interest in that. And after a year on a tugboat with a bunch of older guys, I said, "Where are my friends? They're at university." So I went to university to be around my friends. And I took phys ed. Well, that wasn't the right thing. So then I switched to geology, and that was not really the right thing either. But I was 2 years in. And you kind of, well, I can't switch again, and I didn't really know what I want to do. And John and I were talking back in the early 80s, the kind of focus, get a degree, and then figure out what you want to do after that. And I know it's not that way for you folks anymore. You really have to, I just see that when I hire, that you got to be a little more focused than just saying, okay, I'm going to get my degree and then figure it out. But I got my geology degree. I kind of worked as a geologist with the Department of Mines, and then I worked in northern Newfoundland in the summers. And I think one day I'm in northern Newfoundland in the summer and kind of sitting there thinking, okay, this is not what I want to do for my life, while my girlfriend is back in Halifax. And so I ended up, I went to a conference, a trade show, sorry, and I had my resume with me, and I was just flogging my resume, not sure what I was going to find, and I found a company that was looking for a sales rep selling in the mining and water supply, or water well industry. I had no clue about selling, but I had a little bit of the technical background, so I got a job with this company, and I still had no clue about selling, and he didn't tell me anything about how to sell. I just said, I got pipe for $6.50 a foot, you want to buy it? And so it kind of went from there. Well, I had that job for about a year, and my wife did her education degree at the Mount, and then we came back, at Mount Allison, and we came back to Halifax, and then I wanted to find another sales job. It was kind of funny, I interviewed with a radio sales job. I got kind of cranked about that, thinking this would be kind of cool. And at the same time, I had an interview with Addison Wesley Publishing, and I thought, well, that could be kind of cool as well. So you can get caught up in any opportunity, and you really got to get into it. And so I had my interviews with both, and at the end of the day, I decided to come with the publishing company. And they've been great, and they kind of, back in the 80s, it was a different kind of selling back then. Or 90s, I should say, and it was really kind of, here's my product, here's what I have, and we've all kind of, you've been able to kind of change with the times, and so it's been a kind of nice kind of evolution for me as far as what I've done, gone from rep, and now I kind of stayed in Halifax as a sales manager, and now I'm looking at retirement in a few years, so there you go.
I tried out a lot of different things before I got here. I originally went to university to study social work and psychology, and I didn't want to be in school for 9 years. I've been in school for 9 years since, and I don't have my PhD or Master's of Social Work, but I left university after 3 years. Then I took a break and worked at a call center for 2 years and realized quickly I needed to educate myself again. I was accepted into the Mount, and 2 weeks before I moved up here from Cape Breton, I decided to go to NSCC instead. And I took the 2-year tourism and hospitality management diploma. And then when I graduated there, I had transferred to the Mount to do my 2+2 to finish the tourism degree here. All along the way, my profs and teachers at NSCC kept telling me to go into sales, and I just had this idea that sales were the sleazy youth salesman, old school type. And I didn't think I'd be good at it. It terrified me. But eventually I accidentally landed on a sales job in the newspaper and digital advertising industry and thought, well, I'll try it out until they fire me because I'm certainly not going to be good at this. And 6 years later, I have not been back to the tourism industry, and I'm doing very well in sales. So I did study like I said, the tourism and hospitality management degree here at the Mount. And it seems to me that every time I let go of what I thought I should be doing, that's when I found the right job came to me. The sales job in media came to me a month after I graduated from the Mount. And then this most recent job in radio was a year and a half ago after I said, I'm staying put and I'm not looking for any work for at least 6 months. So that's kind of how I ended up here. And in sales, I think the tourism and hospitality program benefited really well because you work in hotels, you're always going above and beyond what you're supposed to do, and that translates really well when you go into business.
Back in the 80s, the emphasis was on get a degree, so myself as well. I went to St. Mary's. Karen was actually one of my first professors there, so it was nice to get in contact with her again several years ago. I studied marketing, that was my major. After that, I was recruited by Royal Bank. I worked with them for 10 years and then CIBC for another 10 years. It's funny, several of us were at a party about 10 years after we graduated. We were all comparing what we studied to what we were doing for a living. And I was a marketing major doing finance, was a finance major doing sales. The accountant was the only one who was doing accounting, and because it was specialized, and we all had different roles. So I think the biggest thing that a degree does, no matter what the degree it is, tells an employer that you have the ability to learn. So that's one of the foremost things with your degree. After I left banking, I'm working for Costco now as my full-time gig, but I developed, like I said, that hobby into a small business. So it's kind of a far stretch from where I started to where I ended up.
Can you tell us about the types of jobs that might be available for students considering a career with your company?
I'm going to have to be the bad guy to start off. With CertaPro, it's a franchise system, so there's not a huge opportunity and a lot of openings within the company. My office actually that runs all of Nova Scotia as part of the franchise is about 4 or 5 people deep. So there's myself, who is a commercial marketing. I report to my commercial sales. He's also a part owner of the company, so very actively involved. And he does the commercial sales. So once I make friends, I let him do the sales side. And then the other owner is actually the project manager and production manager. So again, very small knit, both of the owners very actively involved. There's a residential sales, and then we have an office associate, and she basically runs the ship. So without her, a lot of us would have nowhere to go. But those are really the positions that are available in the company. And unless one of us leaves, and I mentioned 2 out of the 5 actually own the company. So unfortunately in CertaPro, if you're looking at coming here, not a whole lot, but if it's something that you are interested in, they're one of the largest painting, or the largest painting company in North America. There's over 400 franchises throughout North America. So if you're looking at going on that route, there's definitely opportunity, because there's always spots to open up if you want to jump, kind of get over onto that side of things. And they don't just throw you in the deep end, there is training. So if you ever thought of running your own business as part of a franchise and have the support, there is that opportunity.
In the higher education division where I work, we have about 45 sales reps across the country, and we have a small marketing staff of about 6 or 7 people, and then we have editorial side for developing the products. So most of the people that come into editorial, or in marketing at least, start out in the sales side, and they've done the sales for a little bit, and they understand the market and understand the customers, and then they move into marketing. But we, I think every year we probably end up hiring we'll have about a dozen changes in our sales force of people that want to move on, or the satisfaction level has been much greater the last number of years, and so I'm at least in my area, my retention's pretty good. I have 8 reps, and maybe every couple of years I'll have to hire somebody in a role as a sales rep. So what our sales reps are, basically what they'll get is, well, for example, so I have 2 sales reps in Halifax. One of them covers half of the universities, Nova Scotia, and colleges, and then the other person does the other half. So we basically split it up revenue-wise, and they travel daily. They've got a daily plan and routine of who they go see and what courses, what new products we have that they want to talk to professors about. So if you see people your age or my age walking around in a little better dress, it doesn't mean they're always a professor. They're usually could be a sales rep too.
This is actually good timing, because we are going to start interviewing for summer cruiser drivers, and we usually go to the PR program and look for students there. So that's fun, because you get to drive around in the community vehicles all summer long, attend community events, and give out free stuff and make people happy. You also get a chance to be on air and to record some commercials, so you get some voice training if that's the kind of thing you'd like to do. So it's just a super fun job, and I guess you get to work on your tan if that's something that interests you. We're also always looking for salespeople in Halifax. I'm about to post a position for sales. So you get to represent the 2 radio stations here, and you get to go out and sell advertising, promotions, live broadcasts, ticket giveaways, that type of thing. You get to put some really cool marketing campaigns together for your clients. And then outside of Halifax, we also have all of our other radio stations, and they are often looking for salespeople and summer cruiser drivers as well. We have that program everywhere. So if you're looking to leave Halifax for the summer, that's certainly an option. And then once you get in the company, there's usually room to grow. There's a marketing position. Eventually, we'll be hiring a digital person to do our social media and our analytics, that type of thing. So there's lots of opportunities, short-term and long-term, with our company. So if you're interested, you can talk to me afterwards.
I'm kind of a one-man show, so there's not a lot of opportunity with my business, but what I would encourage any of you to do, if you have a pastime that you think you might be able to convert into a business, as an example, if you're a dog lover, there's lots of dog daycares opening now, and they seem to be doing very well because they seem to be popping up everywhere. So not so much with my company, but I have had an apprentice who I've trained in falconry. He's not pursuing the business side of it, but you know, apprenticeship, if falconry is something you wanted to get into, there are opportunities out there. But I guess my example would be to take a hobby. If you can make a buck at it, then you know that opportunity is there for you as well.
If you had to do your career over again, would you do anything differently?
It's been a long route to get me to an entry position, but no, I wouldn't do anything differently. As I mentioned, I actually started right out of high school doing kinesiology. I was a high school athlete, thought I was going to do and be some kind of sports doctor or physiotherapy or do athletic training for the Toronto Raptors at one point in my life. But that actually ultimately led me to working for the first painting company that I had, and I took a couple years off of school. By doing that, I got to really get to know what the business side was like, and that actually put me into moving halfway across the country to try to actually start my degree for the official first time, or the unofficial first time I should say, and moved to Kingston, Ontario, started my business degree there. Did it at a small college, and got to meet a lot of people. I actually worked in the bar industry as well when I was up there, so got to meet a lot of bar owners. And then when I moved back, I realized that I liked that small atmosphere, and that actually led me to the Mount, because I did not want to go. Like I said, I went to Dal my first year, and sitting in an auditorium like this, if you guys think this is bad, try sitting into one with like 500 plus people. Half of them are watching Netflix or checking out Facebook, and you could fall asleep and no one will notice. So the small atmosphere put me here, and that actually opens you up to talking a lot more. And I think I think most people here have mentioned Karen's name, and that just goes to show I would not have had that at larger universities. So even graduating, Karen and I have got together a few times actually over the last couple of years after I graduated and sit down for a coffee. I came in and actually talked to your class, I think, last semester. So all of that actually led to where I was now, and it led me to working for another small company, selling HR assessments, and then all of that experience from running a painting franchise to working in the commercial sales led me to here, and I'm sure this is just another step in what inevitably will be quite an eventful future for me, because like I said, this opportunity opens up a chance to meet so many different people, and so many, not just in the commercial side, but I might go and make friends with somebody on the commercial side, and they'll be, oh yeah, we got our house that needs to be painted. Next thing I know, I meet their neighbor, and I know their neighbor, and next thing I know, next weekend I'm on the golf course golfing with the manager of a different place, and I'm just friends with them now. And so I wouldn't do anything differently, because as much as you might want to look back and say, yeah, I could do it, it's those little things that I found that actually led me to where I am now. And on a personal side too, the choices that I've made in a career-wise have helped me develop in an actual personal side. So we were just talking, actually, I'm just about 2 months away from marrying my high school crush, which, believe it or not, me moving away and doing the choices I had actually brought me back and ended up meeting her again and reconnecting and actually getting back together, because I actually hired her brother to work for me. It's my sly move to connect on it, but all of that happened, and like I said, I don't think any choice I made, if I changed it, I'd be where I was today and being able to be actually sitting here in front of you guys as well. So.
Yeah, I guess you can always second guess a few choices, but I would have stayed with my tugboat year. I probably at university should have done a business degree because science wasn't, and then I would have avoided the whole northern Newfoundland geology experience. Work-wise, I'm kind of a big, and I think I'm kind of known at work as a lifestyle work kind of balanced guy, and this job has kind of afforded me that. I've been able to, my wife's a school teacher, so our years are kind of similar. I've never really had a desire to move on to Toronto, and I really plugged hard to get out of being, traditionally always just had sales rep positions in Halifax, and I made a plug after about 8 years to have a sales management position created in Halifax. And I guess I put a good enough case forward that allowed me to do that, and then I was kind of settled in. And as I say, Halifax is a great spot to be. Yeah, I mean, I just go year to year, and if I've enjoyed it, and before you know it, the years kind of roll along, and there you are.
I have a lot of I should haves or possibly regrets, but at the same time, I have the best job that I've ever had. And I'm relatively young to be in a director's role, managing almost 50 people. And I've recently taken on our creative and production department and also our marketing person. There's one person in the team, but it's still the whole marketing role. So I'm incredibly grateful to have what I have. But I would probably have stuck with psychology now that I realize I was still in school for the same amount of time. And I also would have not worried so much about what I should have thought I should have been doing. I listen to other people all the time saying you should be in sales, you should be doing this, you should be doing that. What I would do now and what I try to do when I'm making a decision is look at what makes me happy, and it doesn't apply to what job or what industry, it's what you're good at and what makes you tick. So an example is I did social media marketing for the Westin in Halifax, and there's 6 hotels and resorts that the management company owns. And I was miserable in that job. And I kept, whenever I told someone, they're like, how can you be miserable? You're doing social media. It's social. It's so much fun. But I realized I was sitting behind a desk every day of the week, just plugging things onto Facebook and blogs and website updates. And that was draining my energy because I'm an extrovert and I have to be out in public. So that's when I started to look at, I'm good with people and I'm good being out with people. And that's when I took the sales role and started listening to myself that way. So I would say, that's the only thing I would do differently in my career right now is listen to what I want to do and go with what makes me happy and what my skills are, my fundamental skills, and go in that direction with my career. And that's kind of my advice for you as well.
My dream job would have been to be a veterinarian, but I was 17 when I went to university, and I think that was just too much work at the time. So I went into commerce. It still interested me, but looking back, you know, that everybody has, I guess, their dream job. But I met a lot of great people along the way, developed a lot of good skills, and so I've kind of come back to the dealing with wildlife and animals aspect of it in my line of work now. So I guess, you know, we've all had a dream job that we, you know, or things that we could have done or should have done, but we are where we are, so make the best of what we have now. So I don't really have too many regrets. Thanks.
What sort of positions should students seek out after graduation in the marketing field?
That depends on what kind of marketing you want to get into, and there's a big difference. Someone mentioned social media marketing. It's probably, like you mentioned, not what you think it is. It's a lot of behind, but for me, I found honestly the best thing to get into was find a sales role or find a role that is maybe with a small company. And the reason I think that is it's simple. When you go into a small company, if you're doing social media, you're not just doing social media. You probably have to do some direct marketing. You might have to take some clients out for dinner. You might have to go do some presentations. And in the role that I'm at now, my sales background definitely helps out because I've learned to face rejection very well. But at the same time, I'm comfortable speaking with people and I'm happy going out there But it's not just a matter of me going out and talking to people. I do have to do some research. I do have to find out which people to talk to. So finding that role that is going to give you more bandwidth when you're going out, and rather than just focusing on one little thing, especially in marketing, because 5 years from now, the marketing is going to be completely different probably than what it was now. And 5 years ago, actually I can say when I started my marketing degree, Facebook and social media marketing was actually not a big thing, and I only graduated last year. And that was kind of just becoming a thing. And when I went through high school, again, I'm only 27, so I'm not that old, but high school when I went through it, Facebook was not huge and that social media was not big. So it's an ever-changing market, and car salesmen, I've got some good friends to that. People don't just come in and shop anymore. So he has to find other ways to go out and do that. So finding that opportunity, that take the things that even if you don't think you're going to like it, try it. Because I didn't think I was going to like sales until I did it. And I've been doing it ever since 2010. So.
Yeah, I think there's going to be a kind of a sales job theme here, because I can't really speak on marketing very much. I had a marketing job in my company for about a year, and what I found was there were things that I had to get done, and there were things that I wanted to do, like kind of new stuff in marketing, but I could never get rid of all the marketing things that I had to do. And then I also found as a marketer, everybody eventually turns on you. Right? All the sales reps eventually, I thought you were my friend, and no, I didn't deliver something to them in time, and it was an A2 Brute kind of thing for me. So I got back into sales, and I asked my son, who graduated from the Mount in the fall, and I asked in the spring, I asked friends of his that have graduated business degrees, how come when I put out a job advertisement for a sales rep job, I like to get a mix of different, and I like to get a mix of recent graduates as well. But I very rarely get university graduates. I had a job advertised in Montreal, and I had like 2 recent university graduates. I got McGill and Concordia there. And I know McGill students might have higher aspirations, but I would ask my son's friends, how come business students don't seem to want to apply for sales jobs? And I don't know if there's a perception there, but I think they're great jobs. At least in my company, I hired someone out of, he had graduated only 4 months ago from St. FX before I hired him. And he thought it was great. He had a car, he was well compensated, he was going to universities, he was talking to him and to me, really interesting conversations. He's not selling paper towel. And he really enjoyed what he was doing, and he loves the autonomy, so there's this great autonomy. And I think it's just a great sales job, just developing your people skills and just getting comfortable talking to people. And if you've taken like Karen's course, you have kind of the basic understanding, or probably more than the basic understanding, sorry, of selling skills and what's important when you're out there. And then when you're working in a company, working with your sales manager and that, we just kind of tell you, lead you on as far as developing as a sales representative. And you still work in a team, so you have that, but you're working out of home, at least with my company, which is really nice. They like that. And you really, to me, then you really get to understand the marketplace and what your customers' kind of pains are, and what are the problems with your own product. So that really sets you up well when you do want to go into marketing, if you want to stay in that industry. And that's why we do it that way in our company. Go get your couple years of sales experience and understand the market and develop your own skills, and then you can help maybe change things by being in marketing or editorial or somewhere in that area. Anyway.
Does anybody have any interest in sales here? Or absolutely terrified of the idea of it? Okay. I have 2 suggestions, one sales and then what the other jobs could be, the other positions. But in sales, I think you can make really, really good money. And it's a roller coaster of a ride, but if you can tolerate it, you're going to do really well. And you learn how to get what you want. If you do sales right, you know how to ask the right questions. And that just doesn't apply to an actual sales call. That means getting stuff from your coworkers, and it applies to your personal life as well. So you learn how to uncover people's needs and wants, and then you can use that to get what you want. And I don't mean that in a manipulative way, but sometimes you have to try to convince people of something, and sales makes you a better person to be able to do that. And again, the money can be incredibly good compared to most other positions in a certain organization. In a lot of organizations I work for, the salespeople are definitely the highest paid people there. So if you can survive the roller coaster of sales, you'll do fairly well. The second thing, though, the great thing about marketing is you can pretty much do anything. But my take on it is go after a company that is maybe a little bit more traditional, or I shouldn't say boring, but not as exciting as some of the new jobs. So when I went into newspaper, I was there for a month and I thought, what the heck am I doing in the newspaper industry? This was 7 years ago, but I was selling digital advertising. And I quickly learned how advantageous it was because I was young and I had that digital experience that I was incredibly successful in my role, and I was one of the only people in my organization at the time that understood digital. So I became very invaluable really quickly. And everybody thought I was incredibly smart when really I was just like everybody else my age. It's just that I had experience that the older demographic didn't have. So even in radio, we're dying for new, fresh ideas. Marketing is changing all the time because of digital. And we need people that want to come in, that can embrace change, and that come with great new ideas. And the older people bring their own level of experience that's incredibly valuable. But when you're young, you've got that fresh perspective, and we need that more and more. And we need more people applying that are younger and recent grads.
When you're looking for jobs, you may want to decide on what type of industry you want to get into as well. Because depending on what line of work you get into, you may have to wear several hats before you actually get into a, per se, marketing role. You may have to learn the company, what their practices are, you know, merchandising and retailing and all those different aspects of it before you actually take part in a marketing role. So if you have a line of, or a certain type of industry that you want to get into, then you know you may have to take a ground floor job and start learning, developing contacts within the company, and trying to align your career path from job to job to end up where you want to be. From a small business aspect of it, you may take on a lot of those roles all at once, and then it becomes easier to get into the marketing aspect of it, because there's a lot of different parts of marketing. It's networking, it's product placement, it's you know, putting your store in the right location. All those basics from years ago, they still come into play. So be prepared to get into an industry, try different, learn the industry itself, and then you know, marketing may fall into your lap eventually.
What particular skills, attributes, or training make a candidate stand out from the rest when applying for positions? So do things like part-time jobs, extracurricular activities, volunteer work, that sort of thing, do they make an impact on someone's chance of employment?
There's 100% things that are going to help you stand out. And depending on the role that you're doing, that'll be a big thing. So how many here have actually been a server or bartender before? Okay. Honestly, if you guys haven't mentioned half your stories in an interview, those are probably going to be some of the most interesting stories you have, because you're dealing directly with the clients. And if you're going into marketing, you're going to have to learn how to handle not just rejections and stuff like that, but I've been a server, bartender, a bouncer, and I've got some interesting stories on how I've had to handle things. And it actually does help a lot in the side of selling and marketing. Now, on the other side, doing extracurriculars, some of my favorite things to do are I actually go and volunteer at the Rib Fest. I've done the beer festivals, and I've also done a couple other local supporting events, so the Sausage Fest and the Cask Beer Fest. And those kind of things help you go out because you're constantly forced to just smile and have fun, and it's community involvement. And if there's one thing that'll stand out in marketing, it's community involvement. and being able to say, okay, what's your reach like, or being part of different events. So if you can find the time to do that, I highly recommend it. There's times I wish I actually had have been involved in a little bit more, but they're a lot of fun. You can meet a lot of great people, and actually I've got to meet people that you never would have thought of being. And the most interesting one was, I think I sat down and had scotch with the premier back in 2010. So random occasion up in the Ottawa airport, went up for something and sat down. So it just goes to show you never know who you're going to run into. So getting involved in those extracurriculars, taking that job that is going to put you out there and kind of maybe force you outside your comfort zone, and it's going to help when you're going to the interview process, because that's how I've ended up getting pretty much every job I've had, was telling about my life experiences and how you handle things, because there's a big difference between book smart and street smart. And you can be book smart, but if you don't know how to handle a situation that doesn't pop up in a textbook, you get that from just living life and going out and doing those things.
I think I mentioned when I interview, I like to get, I always like to have at least a couple of recent graduates in the mix. And the way our process works is they're all, our applicants are all screened initially by someone in Toronto. And she knows that I'm always kind of making sure that we try to get a couple of just recent graduates in the interviewing process, which then comes to me. So, for those people to kind of get past Aisha, and she's not a real tough person to get past, but it's really, they've got to have a really strong looking resume, and that includes a lot of, as mentioned here, a lot of extracurricular activity, good part-time work. I actually I hired a rep down here in New Brunswick, and he was a St. FX graduate, and I was telling you the story, and his name is AJ, and he had just graduated in the spring, and in the winter, a friend of mine teaches, he's a professor at St. FX, and he teaches a sales course, and so Denton, I'd gone in before, and I'd kind of talked to the class about selling, and I kind of just blurbed on for 50 minutes. I was probably the most boring selling lecture you could have heard of. Anyway, I really felt bad about it. I said, Denton, listen, now let me come back to your class, but I want to bring AJ with me, and I want to tell people in your class why I hired AJ. And it wasn't saying AJ is the most wonderful person in the world, but he had a really good resume, and he interviewed really well, and he did all his homework for his resume. So AJ came back with me, and he just loved coming back in front of all his students, like, his former classmates. So we lectured twice to two different sales classes, and I just talked about what he had done on his resume, how he had volunteered, how he was involved in student committees. He was on in some different conferences, involved in conferences, and then his jobs, he managed to always have a job that had a little bit of selling to it. And you can like you say, as a bartender, you can kind of turn anything into kind of a selling job. I had another guy I hired. He was a fitness instructor at Good Life, but he kind of told me how he sold programs to people, because he said, I sometimes have to walk somebody through a fitness program, but then I can't be their instructor, so I have to sell them on the other person. So he found a way in the interview to kind of talk about how that job was really a selling job as opposed to just being a fitness guy. And so kudos to him for the way that he did that. So to me, I'm going to get cut off, but so it's really important, I think, to do that, and then just really preparing for your interview, and maybe I'll talk about that in number 8.
I guess my advice would relate more to being when I'm screening someone and what you're doing when you apply for a job. I don't necessarily, like, if you have a degree, a diploma, whatever, that's great. Certain universities, certain programs are respected, and we look at the Mount programs very favorably. But the first thing I look at is if you're a job hopper. So if you have a whole bunch of jobs on your resume, unless you're like a PR student who has to do your interns or your co-op, that's a red flag immediately. A lot of people, especially younger people, including myself, I'm still in the millennial demographic, we job hop. I would say stick with a company a little bit longer than you think you should, unless you're terribly unhappy. It goes a long way when somebody's interviewing you. In my company, we're more traditional. We have a lot of older people working for us that have been there 20, 30 plus years, and they're still very traditional in their thinking. So they will neglect some of your better qualities when they're looking at things like, okay, this person only lasted 6 months in their last job, 6 months before that, 1 year before that, 2 years before that. Again, it just looks, there's a little bit of what we say a red flag when someone skips around too much. Yeah, yeah, we say why, and then the worry is recruiting is a really difficult process, and it's very time consuming to find somebody and then train them. And then all of a sudden in 6 months, they leave and you have to start the process all over again. And if you're not one of those and you've stayed somewhere for a long time, make sure you highlight that to an employer. The extracurricular activities, volunteer work, they definitely have an impact because it shows that you're involved and you want to learn new things and you want to get out there. In our industry, relationships are really important, so that shows that you're willing to build them. And you also develop a really good network when you're volunteering. You get to know a lot more people, which makes your chances of finding a job better when you know the person. I personally don't look at a cover letter. I might browse it really quickly, but I go right to what the job experience is and how long you've been in the positions. And then I look for other key attributes. And other people don't do it that way. There's a lot of bias in the recruitment process. So those are my main ones. And just showing that you have a little bit of well-rounded experience outside of your education and you do some volunteer work.
Resume is really important to make it stand out because you're basically marketing yourself. One of the best pieces of advice I ever got was don't make your resume look like an obituary of your career. So, don't go chronologically. Highlight aspects of your career that stood out. If you were in a position for a few years and you excelled in certain things, like you got 100% achievement in your targets, highlight that. Put the 100% in bold, make it bigger, make those numbers jump out. Because your resume may be just one of 100 that someone has to look through. So if there's something out there that stands out from the crowd, then put it in there. And even if you have to change the color, add a picture, change the font, anything that will at least get it looked at. So that's one thing. Next would be your interviewing skills. Try to make an impression. Don't go in boring. Make yourself stand out right from your handshake. If you have to practice shaking hands with somebody to get a good firm handshake, then that'll avoid an awkward moment, when you don't have a good handshake. Just simple little things like that. Have a sense of humor. Crack a joke if you need to. And when you're going for your interview, by all means, especially research the company that you're interviewing with. So you can ask some informed, intelligent questions at the end because they always ask, do you have any questions for me? And you can refer back to their last fiscal reports if it's a publicly traded company, and bring some of those things out. Google's there, so Google the company, just get some history on it, and highlight that in your questions. It shows that you're informed, you're keen, you're interested, and you'd be a valuable asset to the company.
Do you have any advice for marketing students headed into the workforce?
First and foremost, in today's world, watch what you do and what you post on social media. Karen, you just shook your hand. I know that you've probably mentioned that to your class, I don't know how many times. But as I mentioned, I actually ran a franchise myself as I was going through school. And you wouldn't believe how many resumes I personally saw for people that were actually in my class or I would see walking down the hallway. You act like a fool or you misrepresent yourself when you're out at a bar or you're doing anything. People actually take notice of that. And actually some of the jobs that I've had, I've ran into people at networking events where I went and it was a nice job. I've met them before. So when I actually walked into the interview, it was oh, hey, yeah, we've met before. luckily I kept my good self going and I didn't act a fool or I didn't do that. So that is a huge thing. Companies will see that because you as a marketing student should know that you're always marketing yourself. And in the first 30 seconds, we call it the first impression. Karen calls it the ADA model. Remember that because that is a very true thing. So just watch what you're doing. Go out and network. Meet as many people as you possibly can. You never know when you're going to come around and meet them again, whether it's for a job or to sell them something. And then, of course, get out there and do those volunteer events and do the networking. And you're going to find that alone will make a huge difference. It did for me, at least.
I just follow up on 7 with once you've kind of got your interview, then to me, then the interview is, and follow up on what John was saying just about interviewing, because I've had some really nice, good resumes and really interested in meeting the person, and then the interview has just fallen completely flat. And I've had, people walk in with, their sunglasses on their head, and someone that was a referral, and I said from a colleague at work, or actually even someone that was in another division in our job, and I said, well, what do you know about the job you just applied for at the same company you work for? And they say, nothing, really. I know it's a sales job, you go talk to professors. I said, well, have you talked to anybody in the company in my division about the job? No, I never thought of that. And you kind of go, so unfortunately for this person, gone, right? Because you just say, if you're not going to do that, then, so to me, I kind of helped my son prep for his kind of big job interview. And so, I think it's important, you practice questions. You go on the internet, and if you don't have anybody that can throw questions at you, look at what are common questions in interviews. And a lot of them are kind of, oh, here's a good story. And so we're always looking for, tell me a time when you did this, or when you were faced with this kind of issue. And it's kind of uncomfortable to practice it, but I think you have to go into, when you're coming out of university and the job application says 5 years experience preferred, well, if you've got the interview, to me, that's out the window. You've got a shot at this job now, so don't worry about the experience, because they're interested, like you say, in maybe some young talent, some new people coming in. So it's important. I've had so many people just say, well, I went to your website and you're a really big company and you publish books, and that's it. That's all they tell me. Now, with my job, it's really easy. If I interviewed you tomorrow or in a couple of days, you could go talk to Karen and say, Karen, what do you like about your favorite professor? You can go talk to your favorite professor and say, what do you like about, what do you think makes a good sales representative in the publishing industry? You can go to the bookstore, you can just find out so many things. And it's great that when you bring that to the interview, and I say, so what do you know about the job? And it's more than just, I've been to the website, and I talked to so-and-so, and then I went over here, and I talked to this person, and then I have an uncle who used to be in the publishing industry, and I called him, and he said it's changed, and then the last thing you say, coming up with some really great questions at the end of your interview, because that's really disappointing if you, to me, if someone kind of understands the sales process, I could figure out the rest with them. If they answer the odd question the wrong way, that's no problem. You got the basics down. But then having great questions at the end that make me think about what the answers are. Jack had when he interviewed with his guy, who was a general manager at the hotel, he actually researched to find out what his background was. Well, this guy was a chef. And he said, so at the end of it, Jack said, I'm curious, you're a chef, your background is in culinary. What was your career track to get to be a general manager of the hotel? And he said, and when Jack came back, he said, you should see the look on his face when I asked him that question. He thought, what a great question, And then of course people love talking about themselves, and so he went on and told the whole story about where he had gone from kitchen to general manager. So all I'm saying is, in summary, just really prepare well with your interview and treat it like it's the only job that you're going after, and really show a lot of enthusiasm, and it'll get you a long way.
I would say learn how to sell yourself. So, and do what you want to do what you love to do. So if you're a really introverted person and you're shy, maybe being a promotions person or a summer cruiser driver for a radio station, for example, is not the thing for you. Maybe you have influence, your family saying you should do this, you should do that. Maybe listen to what makes you happy and gives you energy to go to work every day. And learning to sell yourself is important. A lot of times there's positives about you that you don't know how to sell. So in an interview process, for example, if you've done a co-op somewhere or an internship or a summer job, tell your prospective employers what a highlight. As you had mentioned, if you were doing a social media project for a company and you were able to grow their Facebook traffic through a contest or something, tell us about that, because when we look at certain things we may not understand. Also, when we're looking at a younger person's resume, a recent university grad, not just younger, but someone with less experience, we know you don't have experience, we know you probably don't have the skills that somebody that's been in the industry for 10 or 15 years has, and that's okay. Focus on what makes you unique. And in the marketing world, as I mentioned before, it's changing dramatically, and it has been for quite some time because of digital. And what we need is someone who's willing to embrace change, and that comes with new ideas. And not everybody understands that that's going to hire you, so you have to highlight that as well. And listen, I know you don't have to highlight that you don't have the experience. Again, we already know, but it's, I have this ability. So I'm a new grad, I have great ideas, I've grown up with digital my entire life, I know how to work my way around this, I know how to, let's say if you're doing social media, I know how to speak to people online without sounding phony, et cetera, and I'm using social media a little bit more than I want to, but it can be any of those things. So just learn how to sell yourself and use your connections as well. So I had a friend recently who applied for a job somewhere, and she was asking me for some advice. And she had worked with 5 of the people in this company. And I said, did you reach out to any of them to say, like, hey, I know you, and they can go to the manager and give them a reference? No, I didn't want to do that. Well, I couldn't believe she thought that that was normal, because when someone's trying to hire someone, it's not always who you know because they get you a job. It makes it easier when I get a phone call from someone saying, hey, I know so-and-so and they're really good, I think you should give them a chance. You're going to have a better chance than some stranger I interview because I just don't know anything about you. So if you know somebody that can help you, reach out to them and say, hey, I know you know Ashley, could you put in a good word, or do you have any advice for me, that type of thing. Sometimes if you go onto LinkedIn and on the profile you have a mutual connection, maybe you're not even really you're not friends with them or you don't know them that well, you could still reach out and ask them for an introduction or some type of help. Anything that connects you to the person hiring you is going to give you a better chance of getting that job.
I would say be confident, not cocky. If you're a shy person, force yourself to make eye contact. Work on your speaking skills, your social skills. Turn your phone off when you go in for an interview. No interruptions. It's a lot of times when you're interviewing, you may be with someone who's much older than yourself. So what they look at is this person in front of me, can I work with that person for the next 10 years or so or more? Work on your interpersonal skills. Again, be confident. Try to make an impression. When I go to a prospective client for my bird control business, I always have one of my birds with me. So I don't go there and say, hey, this is what I can do. I can scare away all the seagulls from the roof of your building. I take the bird out and say, this is what happens when I introduce one of my hawks to, and sure enough, the birds take off. And that's how I make an impression. So find what makes yourself unique, that you can do that, make an impression with the person. If it's a sense of humor, if it's your experience, learn how to highlight that in your interviews.
So now I'm going to ask if anybody has any questions. Yeah.
First of all, thank you so much all for your time today. I really appreciate it. My question is regarding networking. I'm just wondering what advice or tactics you would have for us when meeting new people or doing networking.
I think, actually no, it didn't always come naturally. I'll just tell you the story. I went to a marketing event at, it's Lot 6 now, but it used to be PIPA a couple of years ago. And it was one of my first marketing events by myself, and no one told me how to do it. So I didn't have anyone to talk to. Nobody was speaking with me. It was really awkward. I felt like I was on a comedy sketch because there were a group of Mount grads standing around a circle talking about a professor. So I just inched my way in and I said, "Oh, ha, ha, ha," and I started laughing like I was part of the conversation. Everybody stopped and just looked at me like, who is this person? Anyway, then I just broke the ice and said, "I'm really sorry, but I don't know how to do this, and please just, talk to me. I went to the Mount, I'm a grad, blah, blah, blah," and then it opened it up. But I would say go with someone to a networking event when you first go and just kind of watch what they do. If it's actually a networking event, then most people are more open to introducing themselves to a stranger. This event that I went to and awkwardly worked my way into a circle, it wasn't really a networking event, so nobody was open to really talking, so I had to do that. But you could go in with somebody and ask them to show you kind of how they do it and just observe how everybody else does it. And you can also do networking online, like you can do LinkedIn or something, or even if you know someone's going to be at an event that you want to network at, reach out to them ahead of time and say, "Hey, I'm going to be at this event tonight. I hope I get to see you and say hi," and then you can kind of tag along. Because it can be very scary and daunting I would say even your first year of going to networking events. And use the opportunity to get to know somebody and follow up with them after. Don't just stand there and say hi. Ask them some questions, have something interesting to talk about, and just take it from there. And also, it's not always about how many people you talk to. You might go to an all-day conference, for example, and talk to 3 people, but you've made meaningful connections with them, as opposed to meeting 25 people where you've only said hi and they won't remember who you are.
I was just going to follow up on LinkedIn because I think it's important when you're in university, getting out of university, I don't follow LinkedIn very much myself, but my headhunters do and my HR people do. So having a really polished kind of LinkedIn profile, I guess, seems to be really important. My last 2 people that I hired, my headhunter, who knows what I'm looking for, she actually just went to LinkedIn, found somebody that fit the profile what I'm looking for, and she didn't pretend that she knew him for years, but she said, "Look, I got a job that you should interview for." And because she knew what I was looking for, she coached him coached him for his interview with me. And then I kind of give her a hard time and say, "Don't give away all my secrets," but she kind of knew what I was looking for, and he was the right profile. But then my HR department does that as well. When they have a hard time finding anybody on some of these job search sites, she'll go to LinkedIn and just start surfing around and looking for a good-looking resume, and then contact them and say, "Hey, are you interested in this position?"
Big thing that I've always found help is find out what event you're going to. Oftentimes you'll know what companies are going to be there or who's going to be there. I've done a few with actually the Halifax Progress Club. They did an event down on Pier 21. So it's basically just open tickets. They're not cheap to buy. I think it was like $150 a ticket. So I knew people that are going to be there are typically your business owners. And that is the big thing that you can find too. So I ended up actually getting a chance to meet one of the VPs of Wrigley and had a good conversation with that. And the biggest thing that I learned is I'm not a book reader. I don't like reading books, but I recommend one book to everybody to read, and it's older than anybody else here. But it's by Dale Carnegie, and it's called How to Win Friends and Influence People. Read that book and you'll never go to a network event the same, because what it talks about is smiling, but there's a quote that you'll learn to live by, that the sweetest sound in any language is one's name. And by getting them to talk about their self constantly, they'll actually remember you, and it makes a huge lasting impression. So now you know their name, you know their story, so when you follow up with them later, you know exactly what to follow. "Hey, how was your daughter's dance recital last week? It was a pleasure chatting with you." And you get to know that information, where if me and you happen to meet and I just sat there and talked about myself the whole time and didn't give you a chance, you're probably like, "Okay, I don't want to talk to this guy anymore." But believe it or not, it's a huge thing, and it's helped me in many ways, is just keep asking questions. Even when they turn it to you, you find a way to turn it back, because you're just trying to know them, and they're going to be like, oh, I really like this guy. This guy's a great guy to talk to. And then when you interview him, like, oh, I had a great conversation with him. Now you get a chance to talk about yourself in the interview. So.
I guess for my line of work, I identified who key players in this type of industry would be. I have a lot of regulation through Department of Natural Resources, so I've gone and met with them. I brought my birds with them, let them hold them so they know what I'm all about and what falconry is all about. They may have read a lot about it, but they may not have experienced it. I've invited them out on hunting trips with me with the birds. And because of that, I've gotten referrals from them for client work, and also been referred to do the Outdoor Sports and RV show, which is coming up this weekend. So I made a couple of appearances at the outdoor show, and they've asked me back again this year. And then as a result of that, CTV is going to be there this Friday, so they're going to do a little spot on me at Live at 5. So that's free advertising. So you never know what just a little connection might do. It may take years for it to pay off, but it's always good to educate people on yourself, what you do, and it may pay dividends later.
Thank you so much.
Questions from anyone else? Yeah.
That is not right.
Just bought mine, and I'm going to take it off, so you
I haven't taken this off since I graduated, and I'm not a jewelry person, so it's, I think I only take it off to show people my initials are engraved underneath. Yeah, you're right. A lot of sales jobs are very heavily commission based. I ended up doing that for 8 years. Like when I was running my franchise, I only made money when money was left over from jobs that were being done, essentially is how it worked out. But in those jobs, there are some sales jobs that are more base than there are salary. I find sometimes they're very far and few. But you'll find that that's going to attract the people who are heavily motivated to go out and find that. And you're right, I recently actually just did that before I started here. I had another opportunity, great one, but it was a little bit more commission than it was base. And I'm the same way. Like I said, I'm getting married in 2 months, so I kind of need to make sure paying off the student bills and stuff. But you're going to find that if you are in the right industry, and you're in the right frame of where you want to be. So if you don't like selling shoes, you're not going to go 100% commission on selling shoes. But if you're a car fanatic, you're going to be an excellent car salesman, and you're not going to have that worry about whether you're going to make money because you're passionate about it. And people who are passionate about what they sell it very easily. And you can go tell when someone doesn't want to be selling it, but they're doing it just for a job. And that's what I found is find that job that you're passionate about. So just don't take it just because it's a sales job. Make sure you enjoy it, and it'll show when you talk to people about it. Yeah, that can be tough, but set something, put a calendar. Best thing I've ever done was start using a calendar and block off your free time. And no matter what you do not change that. Unless it's for a very big sale, but I know there's some weekends where I've told people, hey, I'm going to bust my butt and I'm going to work really hard Friday, and I've pulled a 14 hours, or actually a 16-hour day on a Friday because I wanted Saturday to go out and go on an adventure with my fiance, and if I blocked that off, I made sure to go do it. So you do find the time to do it, and you just have to be very committed with your schedule and organized. And it starts from every week. Make sure you look at your calendar and go. And that's what's worked for me. Maybe not everybody, but I start with my week and say, what am I going to do, and where do I have room to move things? And some things are an absolute not move, because you do need time for personal.
I think as in sales, you can always think you can just keep doing stuff. You can never stop if you want. So at some point you do have to kind of cut it off, and you kind of say, okay, if I have to do my work, my life, my balance between things. A lot of it, when we have our sales reps, we kind of say to them, look, this is your business. This is your own little territory, it's your own little company. So how are you going to manage it to be successful at the end of the year? They know what their target's going to be. I used to get into, back in when it was easier, a couple of months left in the year and I knew I'd made my sales number, well, I would ease off. I wouldn't say I got to get these other 3 courses or whatever it was I was chasing. It's not as kind of crucial as it was in other years. Not kind of that way anymore, but as so much anymore, but it's you just kind of do have to find, as I say, you could just keep going on and sending more emails out and do another campaign here, but at some point you kind of just say, have I kind of I've done enough to get myself where I want to be with winning this business.
I think in sales, work-life balance is quite achievable, unless you're, like I was going to do pharmaceutical sales, but I would have been traveling almost every day of the week all over Atlantic Canada, so that would have been too tough. But the beauty of sales, one of the greatest parts about sales is you have the autonomy and the freedom to make your own schedule sometimes. So when I first started in sales, I called my boss, who was based out of Newfoundland, and I said, I forgot to tell you I had a doctor's appointment this morning. How do you want me to inform you of my time off requests? He said, in his colorful language, I won't repeat the curse words he used, but he said, I don't care what you do. He's like, you can come to work hungover every day at 11 o'clock in the morning as long as you're making budgets. So it's not that you get that freedom all the time, but in sales you do get to have certain allowances like that. So you're going to have the 16-hour days sometimes, but you're also going to have the days where maybe you'll go take a longer lunch, or Friday afternoon you might take a client out for a beer or out for coffee or something. So you get a lot of those allowances. And as far as the commission, it's a real issue because I get a lot of people that I know would do well in sales. They just can't see beyond the risk of that commission. Obviously, if you can't cover your bills and you have a family to support, then you can't do it. But if you're making enough to pay your bills and you can do it, give yourself 2 years, because the dividends do pay off after that. It takes a full year to start getting a pretty good base of clients in most jobs, and then 2 years where you have a full on, even the clients that left, you have new ones to replace them with. So it is almost like starting your own business. You know in the beginning you're not going to make as much money, but if you're one of the people that can tough it out for those 2 years, you're gonna have a lot of benefits, including maybe another salesperson on your team left and you get to take over one of their accounts. You've been there long enough, you've proven yourself, so your account base starts to grow that way. And in my experience, some of the most successful salespeople are moms, because they don't have time to mess around. They have to make sure they're feeding their family, and they've got kids to take care of. So it's like you're not coming to work and goofing off. You're not coming in at 11 o'clock every morning hungover, as I was saying jokingly. You've got a schedule and you have to stick to it. So you tend to be more productive than most salespeople. So it's a benefit when I see somebody that's, especially a single mom, you especially have a lot to take care of and you don't have any time to waste. And then as far as working too much, when I first started in sales, I went to Montreal for a sales conference, and I went shopping at Zara, which is my favorite store. And I looked at this blazer and it was $250. And I thought, well, if I work an extra 3 hours this week, 3 hours the next week, 3 hours the next week on sales calls, I've just paid for that blazer. So it was really, the extra time justifies what else you want to spend your money on. So maybe it's not expensive blazers, which by the way I still have after 7 years, that same blazer. Maybe it's something else, like you want to put your child in dance or you want to go on a trip. You can put in those extra hours. But again, sometimes you get to have the freedom to make your own schedule.
Yeah, try not to get discouraged by rejection. 2 of the existing contracts that I have now, I was either, they either went with somebody else or they weren't interested initially, so I just made the occasional contact afterwards just as a follow-up to see how everything was going, and they turned into contracts, so try not to get too discouraged by rejection.
And one thing I'll not talk about in sales is, have you guys ever heard of the crisis of meaning? No? So it's a nice big curve. And when you start off a new job, it can be very high. So first step in it is you're very excited. You've got all this energy to go through and do it, but you don't have the knowledge. So as you get through and you start doing that, you have all this excitement and energy to go start the job, but you don't know anything you're going to do. And I'll tell anyone that starts a sales job, be prepared for the reverse side of that, where all of a sudden you're going to get down, you're going to start to get knowledge, and you don't know what you don't know. And the only thing you can do is try to learn what you don't know, so then you can now turn it into something you do know. Because you'll fall to that pit, you'll start to realize what you don't know, you'll start to learn it, and you'll bring it back up. And as you mentioned, about 2 years down the road, that curve that starts like this starts to kind of balance out a little bit, so your lows are not so low, your highs are still high, but you're going to have that. And it's a little bit different if you start looking at it that way. And my goal for March is I've got a golf membership I want to pay for, so I'm working hard to try to pay for that membership.
Okay, so it's 1:45. We're a bit out of time. Yeah. So if anyone does need to sneak out for class, that's okay. But John actually has something to share.
I talked about making an impression, so I'll just show you how I make my impression when I go into a prospective client. Just 1 second.
That's why we gave you that.
This is Griffin. He's the namesake of my company. He's my first bird and my best hunter. So this is when I meet with clients, I usually bring Griffin along just to they can see what actually happens when you introduce a bird of prey at a site. And he'll be there at the show this weekend.
So does he jump out at people?
No, no,
Like doing that? Are you sure? That's a
So
show.
he's a great icebreaker when I go for a meeting with a prospective client.
It's a lot better than my bucket of candy I bring.
Whatever works. All right, thank you.
Not ready to go back in. All right. I just want to thank everybody for coming today and thank our panelists as well.